Kamala Harris is the party of war. She's a war hawk. I think she's a product of the corporate control of our democracy. I don't think, in terms of the traditional democratic principles, I don't think she has a credible record.
What does the next 30 days look like for the Democrats? How do they actually choose their nominee? I can tell you this much. It will not involve any voters. Yeah, this is democracy without any voters' voices heard. Now, I'm not a Democrat, but if I were a Democrat and if I were a liberal and I cared about my values, I cared about my principles, I cared about what I claim to stand for, I would actually be looking at this guy. This guy right here. He wanted to run in a primary. He's a lifelong Democrat, for crying out loud. His name is Kennedy. He even looks like a Kennedy. He looks exactly like his dad, Robert F. Kennedy. But he was squeezed out of the party process so that they could force Joe Biden down every Democrat's throats during the primary. And now they're negating even that selection from 14 million voters. And maybe if you're an actual principled Democrat who believes what you claim you stand for, you might want to say, hey, let's welcome Bobby back. Well, yesterday, he responded to some questions about Kamala Harris, and I want you to see what he had to say. Because again, put yourself in the shoes of a Democrat. Why wouldn't you want this guy?
Kamala Harris, if she does become the Democratic nominee for president?
Well, I think, Kamala Harris is the party of war. She's a war hawk. The Democratic Party was always the peace party. Kamala Harris is a war hawk on Ukraine. She's a war hawk on China. I think that we should be figuring out ways to coexist with the rest of the world as best we can. Of course, we need to protect our national security. I think she's not going to do anything about the national deficit. I've never heard her speak about the chronic disease epidemic. I think she's a product of the corporate control of our democracy. And she's one of the authors of, in terms of civil rights, she has one of the worst civil rights record of any public official. She's the author of one of the primary authors of the school to prison pipeline. She kept 5,000 people, despite a Supreme Court order that she released 5,000 prisoners of nonviolent drug crimes who were illegally in California jails. She kept them in there, saying that we needed them for firefighting and for other public work services. And that's just a modern version of indentured servitude, a modern version of slavery. She was one of the two leading public officials in California, which now has the worst education system, 49th in education outcomes in the country. 50% of the homeless people in our country are in California, and she was behind those policies. I don't think she has a good, I don't think, in terms of the traditional democratic principles, I don't think she has a credible record.
And that's an understatement. Let me tell you something. And if anyone from the Trump campaign is watching, I know who you are. If Kamala Harris demands a debate with Donald Trump, you should insist on two things. Number one, you should insist on the exact same rules you had in the last debate, because it served Donald Trump bigly. You should insist, okay, fine, but we're going to do the exact same rules as the last debate, with the mic getting shut off and the time and all that stuff, no audience, all that stuff. And number two, Bobby Kennedy's on stage. Demand that. Say, you want a debate? Fine, but none of this one-on-one stuff anymore. I've already beaten your guy one-on-one. You want to have a debate? Let the American people actually get a choice here. Let's have Bobby Kennedy on stage too. That would be a brilliant move. And trust me, Kamala Harris wants that debate. It serves them much. They need it more than Donald Trump needs it. And what will the process look like exactly? Well, Jen Psaki, who is a Democrat, lifelong Democrat operative, and formerly the White House spokesperson for the Biden White House, Before that, worked for the Obama White House. Before that, worked for the John Kerry and Hillary Clinton State Department. Her entire job is as a Democrat operative. So that's why, of course, naturally, she is an analyst and host for MSNBC, because they're not in the news business. Jen Psaki revealed quite a bit about what this process looks like. Accidentally. I don't think she meant to say what she said here.
But now the DNC and the Democratic Party has to run, they're going to run a process, is my understanding. And the process is going to be, the goal of it is to make the vice president look strong and be strong at the end of the process. So that means that's what we're going to see over the next couple of days. We'll learn a lot more about what that looks like.
What kind of a process? I mean, like a competition?
I'm as confused as Rachel Maddow about this. You would think that the process that the Democratic Party was about to engage in would be a process to determine who the people in the party, you know, the voters, the members of the party, the ones who are supposed to be represented by their delegates at the convention, who they want to be their nominee, since their first choice has now been tossed under the bus. You would think that the process is to determine the best person that accommodates the needs, desires, and hopes for Democrats. But that's not the process they're about to engage in. The process, as Jen Psaki said, was to make Kamala Harris to look strong. All right, guys, we're a political party, and we've just lost our nominee. So now we got to engage in a process to prop up Kamala Harris. Shouldn't we have an open process where people can sort of compete for the nomination and give speeches and rally support and say what they stand for and maybe let the people have a say? Nope. The process is, what's the process again, Jen?
But now the DNC and the Democratic Party has to run, they're going to run a process, is my understanding. And the process is going to be, the goal of it is to make the vice president look strong and be strong at the end of the process.
Okay. Well, that's one way to look at democracy. But it seems like democracy has been severely threatened by the Democratic Party here, doesn't it? Democracy dies in Delaware, my friends. Democracy dies in Delaware. Meanwhile, over on ABC News, they have their own Democrat Party apparatchik and hack. That would be George Stephanopoulos. He's basically Jen Psaki, but 3 decades ago, and he's still got his job there. In fact, he's risen up the ranks at ABC News. So, you know, Jen Psaki has a real opportunity to become the Sunday anchor, the morning anchor on Today's Show, perhaps. Here's George Stephanopoulos doing the party's job this morning.
And John, in the end, President Biden really had no choice. It's almost as if in the days since the debate, the Democratic Party held another primary.
Absolutely, George.
Hold on. No, it's not almost as if the Democratic Party held another primary, because a primary is where voters actually get to go and vote. I mean, you could argue that the Democratic Party never even had a primary at all because there were no debates. And the one leading candidate that had the best shot, Robert F. Kennedy, was excluded from events and told that if he tried to run in the New Hampshire primary, that his delegates would actually be stolen away from him. And now, it's almost like the Democratic Party just held another primary. Really, I got a question for you, George. Who exactly is the Democratic Party? When you say the Democratic Party just held another primary, who exactly are you talking about? Who is the Democratic Party? But John Carl's not. He doesn't have the wherewithal to ask such a question. Let's let George go again here. Sorry.
And John, in the end, President Biden really had no choice. It's almost as if in the days since the debate, the Democratic Party held another primary.
Absolutely, George. No choice at all. He was left as the leader of a party that no longer wanted him as the leader. So you had the entire elected leadership. You had the basically the elder statesmen of the party. I mean, basically, Obama never came out publicly, but it was clear what he thought needed to be done.
Speaker.
Pelosi, this was something he just absolutely had to do. And, now the party is breathing a sigh of relief. We don't know what's going to happen in this race, but you can tell what Donald Trump thinks, and he's obviously, it's been scrambled. He was headed towards what he thought was a certain victory against Joe Biden. Now you see an all-out meltdown in his posts overnight. They're worried about a race that they now can't predict.
I again, with this narrative that Donald Trump is melting down, am I the only one who doesn't see that meltdown that these people see, these New York Democrats like Joe Scarborough and John Carl and George Stephanopoulos? But did you notice he also said the party is now breathing a sigh of relief? Who are they talking about? Do they mean Democrats like Jim and Jane Democrat who live in Iowa, who voted for Biden in the caucus and the primaries? Is that who they're talking about? Or are they talking about party elders? Are they talking about leadership? Are they talking about Obama and Chuck Schumer? The party is breathing a sigh of relief. By the way, that's the same party who weeks ago told us that Joe Biden was sharp as a tack and behind closed doors, he's got a command of the issues. And any suggestion that he's lost a step is a cheap fake. That's the same party that's now breathing a sigh of relief that he's gone once and for all, finally. So what are the Democrats about to do? Well, let's break this down because it is going to be a fascinating thing to watch. And yes, major power players are coalescing behind Kamala Harris, but that doesn't mean much, actually. She needs 1,986, I believe, delegates at the convention to win a majority and get the nomination. She currently has about 500 pledged to her. That's less than a third of what she needs. Now, how does she get from point A to point B? It's not pretty. In fact, it's kind of messy. This morning, Greg Kilmeade on Fox and Friends had a very informative breakdown.
So the question you have and your family has and your friends have is what comes next? Now that President Biden shocked us all by saying he's stepping aside and endorsing Vice President Harris. Democratically, let's take a look at exactly the timeline of events. We know about the announcement at 1:46 in the afternoon.
All right, I just take issue with that graphic real fast here, guys. Fox is going out, extending themselves here. Biden steps aside willingly. That's not objective truth. That is not verified fact. You can speculate. You could make that assumption, I suppose, but it's just saying. I'm just saying. All right. I just repeat myself.
Biden then, after a first page saying, I'm out, he says, put my support behind Harris, which means they get the Biden-Harris money already in a coffer. She works the phones, and she's got about over 30 senators, Democratic senators, willing to support her, 153 as of this morning, 153 Democratic congresspeople. She needs 300 signatures to officially become a nominee. That will not be a problem. When it gets to the convention, they put the nominees out there, and they said, do you have a vote? And if she gets over 1,986 votes, she gets through. If not, it goes to the superdelegates. They start again. The only other person I know who seems to be thinking about putting their name in is Joe Manchin. The other question we have is, what does she stand for? Well, we know this. Push for voting rights. It went absolutely nowhere. A few Zoom calls, she lost interest. How the borders are, she's been there just one time. She wanted to get to the root causes of it. Every single year, the three major countries with illegal immigrants coming to our border has risen.
Actually, let me add to that the current head of the Border Patrol says that he has never received a phone call from Kamala Harris, the border czar, in the year that he's been in the job. And of course, his predecessor, the previous head of the Border Patrol, never heard from the border czar. Also, I should point out that since this broadcast earlier today, Joe Manchin has now come out and basically said that he's not looking to be the nominee for president, although his language was somewhat squirrely, so you never know with Joe Manchin. All right, and then this final thing has to do with her position on abortion. Now he turns to a person, and I love the name of this guy's group is Delegates Are Democracy. This is a person who is working with the Democrat delegates. He's a Democrat. And the name of the group is Delegates Are Democracy. In other words, the delegates, the 3,800 delegates who are assembling in Chicago for this convention to decide who the nominee is going to be, that is democracy. They are democracy. That's what democracy means now. It's 3,800 specially chosen special interest union members and big donors who get together in Chicago and decide who's going to be the nominee. So you tell your friends, your Democrat friends, your aunt, your uncle, your grandma who thought Bobby Kennedy's hair was dreamy, And so she still votes Democrat all the time because that's just what we do. That's who we are. We vote Democrat. We've been lifelong Democrats. We're going to keep voting Democrats. Just let them know that their voice will not be heard here. And the Democrat Party is okay with that because delegates are democracy. Let's hear what he has to say about this process.
How close is Harris to locking this up? Well, less than 24 hours after finding out she'd be up for it?
Well, our organization has spoken to hundreds of delegates in recent days all across the country. There is certainly a lot of appreciation for President Biden and his service and the decision that he made to withdraw from the race, and also a lot of excitement about Kamala Harris being the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party.
All right, so let's think about this, though. Nancy Pelosi has not said anything. Barack Obama has indicated we should have an open process. Hakeem Jeffries just praised Biden, and Chuck Schumer's been invisible. Does that matter? Does that show you where the party's at?
Well, President Obama is exactly right. We should have an open process, and that's exactly what we have. Any Democrat in the country, including me or any of my Democratic friends, could put their name forward right now, call 300 delegates, get them to sign a piece of paper, and be on the ballot for the delegates at the convention in August. So we have an open process. We just don't yet have a competitive process. I think that speaks to a lot of the vice president's strengths.
You mean competitive as in it's not close? You mean no one legitimately has a shot at beating her? Is that what you mean by competitive?
Well, look, as I just said, any Democrat in the country could put their name forward. That includes senators, that includes governors.
Right.
There's some really great talent on the Democratic bench. They could be out there right now asking for delegate votes. But what we see instead is them saying that they've met Kamala Harris, they've worked with her, they like her, and they think she's the right nominee for the party.
So here, take a look at the state delegations right now that are in her corner. New Hampshire in, North Carolina, South Carolina in, Tennessee is in. And as I mentioned, you got about 30 plus Democratic senators. Is it important for Democrats to look like this is an open process? Because they had 14 million people already pick a candidate, and then were told without their say-so that that candidate's no longer eligible because of party pressure. Doesn't that look terrible for the Democratic voter that cared and came out in the primaries?
Well, I've been surprised that President Trump has been saying that exact talking point for a guy that wants to make America great again. This is how we picked presidents for centuries. You know, I'm a Democrat. My favorite president ever is President Abraham Lincoln, a Republican. Do you know how many votes he got in the primaries? Exactly 0. We didn't have primaries back then. We had a convention. The delegates chose a great Republican candidate, put him forward, and he served as one of our best presidents ever. That's the process that is in place in the Democratic Party today, the process that you're going to see in August in Chicago.
Right. You're saying the Lincoln process with the Republican Party is the process that the Democrats will have in play today?
That's exactly right. The delegates are from all over the country. Okay. They come to a convention, they have a roll call, and they have a vote. President Lincoln was not the top choice of the convention.
You could have saved a lot of money.
1860.
You could have saved a lot of money and a lot of time if you just told everyone, we'll pick it at the convention. But it's going to be exciting anyway. Chris Dempsey, thanks so much.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. All right. You know, what he just described there as the process that they're going to go through and how wonderful it is and how it's how we've done it forever in America until recent history. And actually in the last, 80 to 100 years, I think, is when the primary and caucus process. And the reason that they did that was because the people were sick and tired of smoke-filled rooms and people making bargains and deals behind closed doors and then just emerging saying, here, this is your candidate, because there was corruption involved, and the primaries and the caucuses ended up being a more purely democratic process. But what he's describing here is this virtuous, wonderful thing that the Democrats are about to engage in, where representatives from voters from all around the country will get together and they'll vote on behalf of the precincts and districts and counties that they represent. There's a word for that. It's called republicanism. And that's what the Democrats are about to do, while calling Donald Trump a threat to democracy. My friend Chris Plant, radio talk show host, and TV host on Newsmax, he likes to say, were it not for double standards, the Democrats would have no standards at all. But that's where we are.